Hello. Welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Liam. Yes,
All right, kid, all
it's
right.
it's the Music Geek Show where we just talk about music. It's wonderful to be joined by one of the defining British rock vocalists of his generation. Liam,
All right, son.
Liam, thanks for taking the time from your solo projects to join us on this.
Mad for it.
What do you think you can contribute that Ben couldn't?
Well, not a lot because, oh, God, I've lost the accent, Phil. Anyway, it's not really Liam, it's me.
Oh,
A
my
lot. I was going slightly scouse then anyway. All right, kid, all right.
There I was, thinking we
I
got
know.
the scoop of the century that was going to launch this channel into the stratosphere.
Well, you got me.
I thought I got an interview there that was going to send me off onto an amazing solo career. I could ditch you, become the god of music geekery on the internet, and
You've got me, Phil. This is literally the stratosphere. You have reached for the stars, as S Club 7 once said, and you have, my friend, you have hit those stars.
I have. So the purpose of this particular show is what, Ben? You're the producer of this particular episode. You had the idea to record this, so
I did. I was bleating on it yesterday about artists that I should listen to and don't for some reason. And I don't know why that is. They've just never sort of been high on my earpiece, as it were.
well, there are no rules, of course, about music and music fandom. There are no artists that anyone should listen to, but I presume you think this is because these artists are highly acclaimed and highly regarded, and you think that maybe you ought to have at least sampled them. And
I should have at least sampled them. Or whenever I think, oh, yeah, that they've got a new album out, so I'm always like, meh.
you're not interested. You've not been able to muster up the. And all of these artists, or the shortlist you sent me, they've all had some
Big
degree
albums.
they've had some degree of success. They've been played on the radio. You've heard some of their music. I mean, it's not as if they're totally obscure.
And I do own albums by them, like the second artist on my list. In fact, when we go through my little list, I own albums by these bands, apart from the first one, which I don't actually own anything by them at all. Would you like to know the first one?
Let's hear the essential list of Ben's artists that he isn't into.
Muse.
Should be.
Yeah, should be into. Muse. Just don't. It's just whiny rock to me. It just.
Yeah. Now you know me. I don't like to slag artists off because people out there are fans of these artists. Sometimes it means a lot to them. I've never been able to get into Muse. I haven't really tried massively hard, to be honest.
No, that's probably my failing. I like some of the stuff like is it Supermassive Black Hole? I quite like that. They're like a I don't know. They're a bit Queeny.
They are. I think they are influenced by Queen. I think they're also influenced by kind of a cross between what could we say? Alternative rock and Queen. Would that be about
Radiohead?
Right? Yeah, maybe that kind of early Radiohead and Queen. I guess the reason that I've not ever wanted to dive in and listen to an album is maybe that the singer's voice hasn't really grabbed me. It's always a very personal thing with singers' voices, isn't it? But
I mean, when I do hear something by them, I'm not like, oh, that's awful. I'm like, oh, that's quite good. And then, meh.
Yeah, so there's a lot of quite good around. But see, maybe we're completely wrong about Muse. Maybe we should have listened to a certain album or albums. If you're a Muse fan and you're not amused by our lack of enthusiasm for Muse, then give us a comment. Yeah. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, my next one is the Beatles.
Okay. Oh yeah, You've only listened to one or two songs. Yeah.
I've only listened. No, I'm only joking. I just wanted to see if I could cause you to melt down because I was expecting your head to go. Bleh. So no, it's the Charlatans. It's the Charlatans. Where are they from? Aren't they from? They're not from Manchester, are they? Aren't they from Winslow?
Isn't it Northwich or
Northwich? Yeah,
something
Middlewich,
like
somewhere around that way.
But it's kind of Cheshire, isn't it?
Cheshire, yeah. I've got a couple of their albums. Is it Wonderland? Got that from about 2001. That's a really good album. I listened to that a lot. And Telling Stories, which it's just got what's his name? Tim
Burgess.
Burgess just doing a Liam Gallagher impression the whole way through it. I think Telling Stories was the last album with the keyboard player died just before Nebworth, wasn't it? So Rob Kelly or something like that, wasn't it?
Now, my Charlatans knowledge is not as great as many people. I remember the first album coming out. I remember them being quite.
Was that early 90s, around 92?
1990, I believe it was.
Was it? Oh, yeah, it would have been, yeah.
I've got the first album.
What was the big track off of that album?
Well, the biggest hit was The Only One I Know.
That's it, yeah.
There's also Then. Remember Then?
No.
A little bit more mellow. Got a bit of a bass bit. You'll know it when you hear it. And then there's also on that debut album, the closing track, which has been the closing track to every concert they've ever done, I think. Sproston Green. Do you know that one?
No. See, this is what I'm saying. I never sort of, apart from that Wonderland album, which I really enjoyed, Telling Stories is good, like How High and all that sort of stuff. Got quite a good video to that one where I think he's actually released. He wears this I think it's a black and yellow or full-on yellow cagoule in it. I think he's released that recently. I think you can actually buy, not the cagoule, but, someone that is manufacturing that cagoule.
Well, I think the Charlatans sort of set the tone for having because they have had a long career, with their second album, and I think it was called, it's the album with the bananas on the front.
I know the album.
I think it's called Between 10th and 11th, I think it's called. I may have got the numbers wrong. I think that's what it was called. But the hit single was a song called Weirdo. And that was kind of like... It was very different to the first album. The first album was just like they were playing their gig and it was being recorded, more or less. It was just, the guitars and the organ and everything. I think there was more... I think there was more electronics on the second album, and it was a bit more experimental. And he's gone again. There you go. Who did I mention the other day? That 50s crooner, that star.
Paul Anka.
Paul Anka, yeah, he sent you off.
Yeah, massive Anka.
Paul Anka got you all buttered up. And,
he did indeed. Yeah.
So, where were we? The Charlatans. Well, I remember when they did. Do you remember when they did? I mean, you look back on the 90s, you think, it's just all the 90s, but it seemed at the time that they hadn't really been away, but it was like a bit of a comeback. One to Another. Remember that single?
Yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
Very energetic.
One to Another.
Very energetic.
Your sister and your brother.
Yeah, very confident track.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. Like I said, the Wonderland album, there was a period in that early 2000s. You know how you get those bands who, I suppose like the Beatles, Oasis and all this, that solidify a generation. And then you get those bands that have been around for a little while. And then all of a sudden, because those major bands aren't really doing anything anymore, you all of a sudden get that band that becomes the biggest band in the country. And I think around that period, 2001, Charlatans were like, because there's nobody else, became huge. And I think
they
go through this cycle. Yeah, you go through this cycle of these, what I call satellite bands. You get your big ones like Stones, Beatles, Oasis, Smiths, and you get the little offshots. And every one of them bands has its period, like Ash. I think there's a period sort of early 2000s where Ash were like massive. But there was that period when the Charlatans just seemed to, I think like U2 when they released Beautiful Day and Vertigo and things like that, there seemed to be a period where they would just release it. Everything just seemed to be by them. So, yeah. But I never got into them really, anything after that or pre that.
I should, yeah. I mean, I think they're an excellent band in terms of having been consistent and doing great shows. I've never gone really deep into them. I think Tim Burgess is an interesting character. He's a real music geek. He knows a lot about music from way back, and he's on Twitter quite a lot. I think he alternates between music geekery and political rants. The political rants aren't that interesting because they're sort of carbon copy political opinions that all the other rock stars have got anyway. So that's not really that interesting. But his views on music are quite interesting. So he's worth a follow. I think he does these listening parties on Twitter.
Oh, does he?
Where he gets people
I could do one of them.
Listen to an album and then tweet their thoughts on it as it goes on.
Oh, we could do that.
Yeah.
We could have Phil and Ben live. We could listen to albums that we both enjoy and other people probably despise. But
we could do it, live stream it, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Do you want the next one on my list?
What's next?
The Eagles.
Uh-huh.
Eagles. Never Really, I've got a few albums by them. I said they're another one I've got albums by, and I put them on. And I always say music should do two things to you. It should either make you want to sit out in a hammock in a tree. No, hammock hanging from a tree. It should make you want to sit in one of them, lie in one of them, whatever you want to do in the hammock, but be in a hammock with a cold beer, and it should make you want to be like chilled out, relaxed. Or it should make you want to walk down the street like a hand grenade with the pin pulled. So it should do something to you. And whenever I put the Eagles on, it's, it's like when somebody shows me their newborn baby and you have to like go, oh yeah, it's pooed itself. You just,
Yeah. What's my view on the Eagles? I've always thought the Eagles are okay as a mainstream rock band. I've always thought their songs they work great on the radio. I mean, that's their thing. They were FM radio in the 70s in America, particularly. That was they were the sound of FM radio rock, and I think it's pretty good. I mean, Hotel California is one of those songs. Obviously, there are a lot of people who love the song. There's also a lot of people who hate it because it's been overplayed and they think it's overhyped. Of all the overhyped and overplayed classic rock songs, if you put Hotel California on now, I would quite still enjoy it, strangely.
I do enjoy Hotel California.
Yeah, I like the guitar bits on it. And for some reason, I normally get bored of these well-worn rock songs, but I would...
See, what I would say about a lot of these artists in my list is, to me, they're more about the singles. I'd listen to the singles, but when I put the album on, it's like, well,
it's not that great.
That.
I must admit, I don't know many of the Eagles albums that well. I tend to know their hits more, so I can't comment in detail on it. But what's next?
Do you want my next one? Maybe a bit controversial, this one, but it's Michael Jackson. It's just singles, great. Billie Jean, the others that I can't, black or white, Man in the Mirror, stuff like that. Love the sing. But when I put the album on, I'm like, I only want to listen to the singles, really.
Yeah,
these are all bands that I could buy the best of, and I'd be happy. I wouldn't have to buy the back catalogue.
Well, Michael Jackson, he was a pop star. He was all about singles, really, wasn't he? He was never really the album artist. And
I do own Bad, Thriller, Off the Wall. Is it Ben?
Well, with Thriller, where did the singles end and the album tracks begin? Because it wasn't every track.
It was track a single, more. Yeah.
I don't think they didn't stop milking that for quite a while, did they?
A bit like Alanis Morissette with Jagged Little Pill. There's a lot of singles off of that album as well.
So I think Michael Jackson, in terms of greatness as a pop artist, I don't think it really matters that much, does it, about the albums, because he had so many hits.
The singles. If you gave me an album of Michael Jackson singles, I'd be like, it's a good album. A bit like George Michael. There's another one who's not on my list but should be. Even though the older album, I love that album, brilliant album. But all the rest, Without Prejudice, all that sort of stuff. Just give me the singles. Hit me with the hits.
Yeah, similar thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Jacko dealt with. What else?
This could be controversial as well, but they only did one album. It's the Sex Pistols. Well,
now, let's have a think about this. Now, the Sex Pistols, I don't spend much time listening to the Sex Pistols music, to be honest. Obviously, I can see how it was important at the time because it was a massive thing at the time and had an influence. And I know there's the argument, of course, that they were kind of like a rebellious version of the Monkees because Malcolm McLaren was kind of like the mastermind behind it. And so therefore the band was to a certain extent seen as being manufactured. And you could argue as well that they blew their musical credibility a bit by removing Glenn Matlock and replacing him, the genuinely talented Glenn Matlock, and replacing him with the genuinely untalented Sid Vicious.
You couldn't actually play bass, could
not really, no. So it was all for image and everything.
He was the Stuart Sutcliffe of the 70s.
But you are, of course, a massive Oasis fan. That man who's on your T-shirt, I think, owes quite a bit to Johnny Rotten, doesn't he?
Yeah, that sneering frontman thing. I get that. And another one, I can put a Sex Pistols song on and I'll enjoy it, but just like me.
There is only one album. My thing with the album is that although I wouldn't say it's badly produced, and it's produced by Chris Thomas, who'd worked with the Beatles, he'd worked with Pink Floyd and all these artists. But I feel that the Sex Pistols album doesn't sound raw and outrageous enough to suit the image of the band that had been created.
Yeah. To me,
it doesn't sound raw enough to me.
Sometimes the Sex Pistols to me sound like, and like I say, I do enjoy all these artists for what they are. But to me, if you gave a bunch of angry rats some instruments and threw them in a tin, that's what it sounds like. Angry rats in a tin playing. And I'm probably really wrong. I need to listen to the album fully, but to me, there was better. Oh, that sounds really wrong because I'm not sort of slagging them off because I do enjoy it, but I just don't. They're not.
Me talking about the production. Have you listened to the bootleg of the Sex Pistols, which is the first version of the album before it was more produced?
I have heard bits of it, didn't they? Didn't they release parts of it?
It's been released now. Yeah,
it's more spiky and punchier than.
So that might be better.
Yeah,
but you're not really saying that you don't like these artists, though, because I thought this was a list of artists that you just don't like or you haven't really bothered to listen to. But actually, you do know a fair bit of them, but you just
I do know
can't be bothered with them.
I just can't be bothered. Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
It's a band of Brian Ferry.
Okay.
Roxy Music.
Now, I only really know the first album is the one that I know better. I've always intended to do a bit of a deeper dive on Roxy Music and listen through the albums because I know they were.
I've got some Roxy Music. I've got Brian Ferry stuff.
I know they were very acclaimed. You see, you've got more than I have.
Yeah,
but you don't listen to it.
No. A bit like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Don't listen to that. I bought it because I thought, I'll get into prog rock. And then I put it on, listened to the first couple of tracks, and I was like, I can see why prog rock isn't a thing anymore.
So you don't have an opinion on Roxy Music after Brian Eno left or anything like that? Nothing.
No, not really.
Nothing that deep. You just can't be bothered.
I mean, if I heard something by him, I'd probably be like, yeah, that's. But when people go, oh yeah, Roxy Music, I'm like, yeah.
Roxy Music fans, tell us how wrong he is. Give us the views in the comments. What's next, Ben?
Everybody's favourite. Oh, I call blimey, governor. Oh, I apples and pears. It's Blur.
Yeah. Well, of course, this ties in with your long-term teen fandom for Oasis. You were basically, you were.
I was in the Oasis
inculcated to dislike Blur.
Yes. And that's not to say I don't like. I love Coffee and TV, Song 2. I do have a couple of Blur albums, but it's another one when I put it on and I'm like, just give me the singles, really. It's kind of like
album tracks that you really like.
Do you know when people go, oh yeah, and by the way, I like this film, but when people say, oh yeah, man, you should watch Citizen Kane, and you're like, okay, I'll put it on, and then you put it on, and you're like, I know I should like this. But I don't.
But it's the cinematography, isn't it, as well, with Citizen Kane? Because every shot is so well composed and all that. I don't know why we're talking about Citizen Kane.
I don't know. But Blur, I do like stuff that Blur have done. I like Damon Albarn's solo stuff, Gorillaz, The Good, The Bad and The Queen. His solo album, which I think I showed.
There are some great album tracks by Blur, though.
There are some mega album tracks.
I'm just thinking, ones that were not hits. This Is a Low.
Yeah,
Trouble in the Message Centre. He Thought of Cars. London Loves. I like all these tracks.
What's the really slow one with the sort of like?
There's a lot of their album.
Is it Think About the Universe?
The Universal.
Love that track.
See, there's a lot of that was a hit, but there's a lot of their album tracks I think are as good as the singles.
Yeah.
So they're not. It's not as if they're the albums aren't worth listening to.
No. I'm just gonna have a look up.
Okay, Blur.
This Blur song, because I can't remember the title of it, and once I see the title, I'll be
it's a ballad, a mellow one.
Yeah, Blur.
That's the Universal, isn't it?
I think it could be the Universal, but I'm just
from the
Coffee and Tea. Charmless Man, great song. Part Life, great song. Uh, There's No Other Way, another one I could quite
another
No
mellow
Distant.
blur. No
Yeah, No
distance left to
Distant.
run. Yeah,
Brilliant track. Love that track. Death of a Party, another great. End of a Century, another great track. It's just
tender.
Tender. Tender is the night.
So I mean, you sound like someone that quite likes Blur. So why are they on this list?
Because it's the filler tracks in between those singles and stuff on the albums, which are
Right.
just they don't,
Okay.
Maybe I need to listen. Like I said, I need to listen to them more and get into them a bit more, and then I won't be.
You won't have
I
them on
probably
this
won't have this.
list.
Yeah, and like I said, they're not on this list because they're crap. They're on this list because I'd rather listen to something else.
Blur fans, let him have it in the comments. He's an Oasis fan. He doesn't deserve any mercy. So what's next?
Well, next was going to be Radiohead, but I've realised I've actually got into them recently. So, and I've been checking out Tom York's son's stuff, and that's quite good as well.
Okay.
So I swapped out Radiohead, and because I didn't want them getting all paranoid Android. So instead, I have dumped in their place. And there's some people out there going to hate me for this, but it is Depeche Mode. I know.
That's going to cause some consternation.
And once again, I've got Depeche Mode stuff, and if I was to go through my collection of vinyls, which is all behind me, and and I was going through and had a choice, say between Depeche Mode or, I don't know what. I've got so many, but I'd probably be like. If I was going to pick an Elbow album, I'd go for the Elbow album all the time. New Radicals album. I'd go, And that's not to say that I don't like them. It's just the fact that they're just not. I just don't get the hype around them. They're good music. Don't get the.
You're not getting the garn.
I'm not getting the garn,
or the gore, maybe.
Gore, yeah.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I must admit, they are not a band that I listen to a lot either, and I'm certainly, I don't want anyone to think that I'm in any way disparaging Depeche Mode. I think they are clearly, obviously, a great band. They do great concerts.
They are, yeah.
They've made acclaimed albums. They've been going a long time.
I own a couple of them.
They haven't really tailed off and done loads of crap, have they? Though they've been pretty consistently good, I believe. So for me, I think the reason I didn't get into them was, and this is a personal kind of prejudice by
Personal Jesus.
Yeah, well, we nearly got the.
Is it Personal Jesus?
Yeah, that's the song.
Yeah.
On Violator.
Personal
I think the reason is because they're a synth band, an electronic band. I always gravitated more towards guitar bands.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what does it for me.
And for me, the synth thing, if I listen to the synth music, I prefer it to be, or I always did prefer it to be, something more like the Pet Shop Boys, that was more pop and more kind of entertainment, and not really the more serious stuff that Depeche Mode do. And for that reason, I didn't ever get totally drawn into Depeche Mode, and then because I haven't been a fan properly, I don't have that sort of
connection with
that loyalty to them.
Maybe if I was born in the earlier 70s or late 60s and I'd grown up with it, it may have been. But my parents never listened to it. My dad listened to country and western and stuff like that. My mum, In Excess. I remember having that Fairground Attraction, Fleetwood Mac, a lot of stuff like that. So, but that does lead me on to my next one, which I've added in, is Gary Newman. Don't get that.
Well, Gary Newman is kind of like the original. Well, he's the kind of the template for Depeche Mode in a way, isn't he? And
here in my car, I go in Cars.
The Cars has been perhaps overplayed. I think I prefer of the two massive hits. I think I prefer Our Friends Electric. But,
that's a good track. But I just don't. just
But
don't
see,
get
I
it.
can't comment too much on Gary Newman because I don't know his albums.
No, well, nor do I. That's why I
And
can't. But he's just another one of those artists. When people say, "Oh, Gary Newman, man,
but
you got to listen to Newman.
you
He's got
see,
a pling." Like that.
you see, he was influential at the time. But the other day, I was listening to. Well, I'm a bit of a Prince fan. I was listening
Are
to
you?
the 1999 box set thing that they did. I don't actually have the box, but I was listening to it on streaming.
So you listen to the set?
Yeah, and on the 1999 album, I think Prince was influenced by Gary Newman. Particularly, there's a song called "Automatic." Have you heard "Automatic" by Prince?
No, no, no.
Automatic.
See, Prince
That's
is another one I need to
very
get more
Newman.
into.
Well, you see, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably a lot you've not heard. You see, but again, with Prince, I don't know how. Well, you see, on one level, I have. Where am I going with this? There's certain artists that you've listened to since you were young, and you've followed them, and they're still acclaimed and they're still good. But and then I can't. So why do I still like Prince? Is it because he's good, or is it because I also have these nostalgic memories
Connections to
and
him.
having gone to his concerts years ago and stuff like that? So am I? It's difficult to know where my objective appraisal begins and my nostalgic thing.
No, because I probably have that a little bit with Matchbox 20 because I've
Yeah, yeah.
listened to them for so long, and I know they're not the band that they were because they were more rocky, that American sort of post grunge rock, and are now more sort of electronic rock, pop rock, I suppose. They've gone more sort of subtle, as it were. But because I've been to their concerts, because I went to Madison Square Garden, because nobody else really around in this country really knows who they are, it's almost like, oh, they're my little thing.
Yeah.
That's my little, and you sort of hold on to a little bit more. So,
Having
there
said
we
all
go.
that, if you look on YouTube at these artists, I've done it with Prince, I've done it with others. You look at the videos and there's comments underneath. There's youngsters who are getting into the music that don't, they weren't born.
No, well, look, when I went to Nebworth last year to see Liam Gallagher, and when I went to see Noel the week after,
Yeah,
the majority of people there's a lot sort of my age, late 20s.
yeah.
And there was a lot of people there who were,
Not
you
born
know,
in the 90s.
not even probably born in the 2000s, late,
Yeah,
mid
yeah.
2000s and
Now, in
stuff.
that
So
case, though, a lot of those, have they grown up with the Oasis music because their parents played it?
possibly.
So with those, it's kind of, there may be a slightly different thing. But,
So are you saying that Oasis to them is like Kenny Rogers for me?
well,
You
could
picked the
be.
fine time to leave me,
It
Lucille.
could be. You see, you do enjoy it. Now, if Kenny Rogers
Yeah, I
was
do.
super cool and selling out
Yeah,
Nebworth, you'd have gone on the
I would have gone
basis.
to that. Yeah,
You'd have
yeah,
gone.
yeah.
So
So,
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So does that mean I can get you into Prince even though you weren't part of the Prince cult as a teenager?
well, you
Who
could
knows?
try. Yeah, you could. Yeah,
And can we do it with other artists as well? We can try it,
possibly.
but
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So that was Gary Newman.
Next, the Flaming Lips. And I do like
Okay.
the Flaming Lips. I like Yoshi Battles, the Big Pink Monsters, or whatever it was called, and the Soft Bulletin, because you got me into that when we did a radio show, which is the
Oh yeah,
Eye
yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
Prize, or whatever it is.
The race for the prize. Yeah.
Brace for the Prize, that's it. Yeah, love that album. Really great album. But just, they're
So,
mental. And I love that fact that they're mental, but it just doesn't connect with me.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
I've not gone deep into them, and I had that Soft Bulletin album and quite liked it at the time, and it was quite
Yeah.
groovy and different. But and I do still quite like that, but I've never felt the need to go and buy all their albums and get really
No,
into them.
no,
It's
no.
just for me, it's a bit of a quirky little thing that I like every now and again.
Yeah, yeah. So that's that one. So we're part
Okay,
Flaming Lips there. Next is Metallica.
okay.
I
Do you
like
have
Enter
any?
the Sandman and stuff like that, but
Do you have any memories of Metallica?
no, no.
See, I
I like the
remember.
drummer.
I remember when the Black album came out, and because I was aware of them, because in the 80s, early 90s, there were people that were into heavy metal. They were the metalheads,
Yeah,
and then they loved all the heavy metal. They loved Iron Maiden and Metallica and Slayer and all these bands. And then if you weren't a metalhead, then you didn't listen to it. You were either a metalhead or not. Yeah.
Or you listen to Cat Stevens.
I did dabble a little bit in heavy metal, although I was
Oh, I
more.
thought you were going
I
to
was
say you
more.
dabbled a little bit in Cat Stevens. And...
I was a little bit. I was more hard rock than heavy metal. But anyway, the Metallica album, yeah, that came out in '91, and that sort of put that sort of thing in the mainstream for a while. But I see Metallica and that sort of band as being like it's like the rock version of a very heavy classical music. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. Yeah,
Like Wagnerian, there's some classical music you can listen to and you can quite enjoy that, like a nice little Mozart piece or a bit of Vivaldi Four Seasons, and most people can sort of enjoy that. And then you've got this really intense classical music.
Yeah.
And Metallica, to me, is kind of like that.
The Mozart of rock.
I remember once I had a mate who was into all that kind of stuff, and one time we sat down in front of the Hi-Fi System and we listened to all of Metallica's "And Justice for All" album, which is their late '80s album,
Yeah,
which has songs on it that are about like 9 minutes long and just absolutely sort of pulverizes you with the sound. And it's very impressive in a way. I find it impressive, but I don't love it.
yeah.
That's
I think that's where I'm with a lot of this stuff. I'm impressed by it. I enjoy it, but I don't love it.
That's all I can really offer on Metallica. I say it's impressive. I can enjoy a bit of it, but I don't get much soul from it. That's the thing.
No, it's a bit like things like Rage Against the Machine. It's another one of those bands where I should like them, and I've got one of their albums, but just I could put it on, listen to it, and then if I didn't revisit that album for 5 years, there wouldn't be a piece of my heart missing, devoted to it. So, right, we're down to the last three. Yes,
okay.
We're down to the last three. And I'm going to swap this order around and leave the controversial one to last. Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay.
No, it's just the way I'm sitting. Hey! No, actually, genuinely, the band was Smashing Pumpkins. So there's three. I like 1979.
Yeah.
I like Tonight. I like him in The Simpsons where he goes, "Hi, Billy Corrigan, Smashing Pumpkins," and Homer Simpson goes, "Homer Simpson, smiling politely." So yeah.
Well,
so apart from that, I just find Billy just not.
Well, Billy Corgan is one of those vocalists who
that's
you might find him whiny. If you find him whiny, that's to put off. I must admit, his voice isn't one that hugely appeals to me. This is weird, though. Having said that, I've always quite enjoyed Axl Rose's vocals. So how can I call another one whiny? I don't know.
I would say Axl Rose has got a bit more. It isn't nasally, isn't it?
Yeah. That's it. Maybe that's it. Yeah, he's a bit more.
Axl Rose it sounds like it's coming more from here than here.
I think they're a good band. Obviously, they've got some albums that are key '90s albums. There's obviously Gish, and then there's Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, the double one.
Yeah,
and the what's the one? Was it Siamese Dream?
Something like that. Yeah,
Smashing Pumpkins.
I mean, the video I love Tonight. I think that's a brilliant song. I think it's one of the best songs of the '90s. I'm going to put it up there. It's probably one of the best songs. A great video as well.
I should perhaps listen a bit more. Maybe I can get round Billy's vocals.
Wine. Yeah.
Give it a go.
Yeah. So that's all I can say on the Smashing Pumpkins, really.
Okay.
Next up, REM.
Ooh.
Oh, Phil's going to have a little
Give it
cry.
to him, folks.
Ooh.
Now, I
have a little cry.
Now, I've been an REM fan for a while, and I'm not as big a fan as I was, not because I've gone off them, just because I don't listen to them as much. Obviously, perhaps that's partly because they're no longer an active band. But I was an REM fan, but I don't generally like to quote REM as a favourite band because is it because there's a slight nerdy image that I look like a typical REM fan? Is that right?
Because you look like Michael Stipe.
Because I look nerdy. So it was it was a bit predictable for me to say I like REM because I just look like the sort of nerd that
You
would
just
like
need some
REM.
blue eyeshadow, and you would look like Michael Stipe.
That's true.
So.
Saw them live once. Got into them late because I wasn't really into alternative.
Was that when they supported Sleeper and sang Louise Wenner?
So
Happy birthday.
Louise and Sleeper supported REM, and Radiohead were on the bill as well. Radiohead had just done the Bends.
Great album.
But yeah, Michael Stipe brought Louise. During REM's set at some point.
Yeah.
Michael Stipe brought Louise back on stage because it was her birthday. So I have sung Happy Birthday to Louise Wenner, along with thousands of other people.
Louise Wenner, I would have to say, is the biggest hottie in pop.
You think so?
Yeah. I am raising your Deborah Harry.
Are you saying
Louise Wenner there?
Well, look, I mean, I could say, right now, if it was the choice between Louise Wenner and Debbie now.
Even back in the
Debbie's
day.
77, okay, I get that. But you're saying of all time, you're saying the peakness.
Peakness.
You're saying Louise Wenner.
Yeah. Does Debbie Harry. Well, there's a film
I
wouldn't mind watching.
I can't buy this one. I can't buy any woman being hotter than Debbie Harry.
Don't insult my Deborah.
Not in music. Surely not. This cannot be possible.
It is. I can't believe we've got... I haven't even got to the controversial artist yet.
Controversial.
Yeah. Louise Wenner is the pin-up person of pop.
Okay.
Even today at 56.
Okay.
I'm still like, oh, hello, Louise.
Well, going back to REM, what can we say? Yeah, I got into them late. So I wasn't into alternative rock in the 80s. No. So I did have to catch up. And I didn't really listen a lot to REM until they did Out of Time, to be honest. That wasn't the first time I'd heard REM. I had heard bits of their stuff and before that. But I'm trying to think, what am I trying to say with this? They're one of those bands. They've got a lot of great songs. They've got a lot of great songs tucked away on the albums. They sometimes have songs that take you years to like. That's the thing I find with REM.
Another thing that I think that puts me off REM is the band that did Shiny Happy People.
Yeah.
And Michael Stipe is so miserable. I can't imagine him being happy. It's like, mate, you're a multi-millionaire. You're an award-winning artist. You've had millions of albums sold across the world. You've got everything you could possibly have wanted when you started off on this musical dream. And yet you're so miserable.
But isn't he just thoughtful?
As a famous philosopher once said, he is a man with a fork in a land full of soup. That's what that man is.
But couldn't you say that about a few others as well?
Yeah. Bruce Willis always came across as miserable.
It's not as if Michael Stipe has no humour or personality in his songs.
Humour.
But whatever he's like as a person in the songs, in the music, he does have a personality and he does. What is it in? Things.
What's the? It's not The Lion Sleeps Tonight that they do. It's the Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, where he laughs halfway through one of the lines. Yeah. I like that. I like funny Michael Stipe.
Did you know they also did do The Lion Sleeps Tonight? There is there's a cover of. I got it's on the B side. I got the cover of The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
That's my go-to song. If I've got a rolled up bit of card, that's my.
Yeah, right. Not the Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight.
No, not the Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight.
No, you see Michael Stipe. Yes, of course, he did laugh during that vocal take on Sidewinder,
and they kept it in, which was good.
And they kept it in. And I think he does have a sense of humour. I think he's probably maybe a bit dry, and he maybe doesn't show it in interviews as much. But I think he probably is not as miserable as you think he is.
No. Are you ready for my last one?
We need to try and get you into REM a little bit more.
Yeah.
The last one. Well, I think I know what the last one is.
It's the Beach Boys. So,
Beach Boys. Is it? Yeah. Yeah.
It's the Beach Boys.
Yeah. Okay.
For that California.
So, Music Geek Heresy has just been committed because Ben has just said that He doesn't like the Beach Boys.
I don't know. It's not the fact that Good Vibrations, great track. It's just those harmonies and that. It just feels a bit cheesy to me. If someone said to me, name the biggest bands of like the 60s and 70s, I don't think the Beach Boys would make my top 10.
Well, the thing with the Beach Boys is
Here we go.
they
His hackles are up.
well, they are a
Hackles.
band. Well, that's yeah. We say a
Here we go.
band. You don't think of them because the image of when you think of the Beatles, you can think of the Beatles standing there with their guitars,
Tarts, yeah, yeah.
and same with all these other bands. With the Beach Boys, you don't quite get that same mental image, do you? Because there isn't. They are obviously they did have guitars, but they also do a lot of vocal harmonies and things, and so it's the sort of the vocal harmony side, the vocal group side of it. In a way, there's almost like a sort of like the Four Seasons or something like that. There's a
It's like California's answer to Barbershop Quartet.
So they are a band and were a band, but you tend to think of them as I tend to think of them as a group more than a band. Does that make any sense? Even though they were a band.
Yeah. I was trying to think earlier what my favourite songs by the Beach Boys. And obviously Good Vibrations, love that. And then the second one that came into my head, I realised quickly soon afterwards, was actually done by the Osmonds. Was it Wild Horses or whatever it was?
Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse, yeah.
You thought that was the Beach Boys.
I did at first, yeah, and I got all confused. But I do own some Beach Boys stuff. But like I said, out of all the artists on this list, I would say they're probably one of the ones nearer the bottom.
Now, you see, I got into them by why I decided to buy it now, but I got hold of. I think maybe I saw it at a reduced price. I was always intending to listen more to the Beach Boys, mainly because of the acclaim and stuff around them. And I got hold of the box set that was out in the 90s, the Good Vibrations box set, which is a 4-disc set, just goes through their whole career. And it's got a book with it. And so by reading the book and going through it and learning about them as I listened along, that kind of got me into the Beach Boys. Whereas I don't know whether I would have got into them any other way, really.
I don't want people to think I'm a musical philistine. I mean, I have over 1,000 12-inches, so I do enjoy my music. Like we said, it's not the fact I dislike these bands; it's more the fact that I'd probably put something else on.
Yeah, so maybe you need to expose yourself to it.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe. When you were a kid and you went round to like a mate's house and say their dad. I had an ex-girlfriend. I've had a few, and her dad was a massive Queen fan. Had loads, and I always remember thinking, I won't just like one band and listen to one thing when I'm that age. Turns out you do. You end up getting stuck in your ways and you just listen to X, Y, and Z. And maybe I need to open up my inner door and let more stuff in.
Yeah, because you've got this thing about the Beach Boys being like Barbershop Quartet.
Yeah.
Now, they were, of course, very influenced by the Four Freshmen, who were a vocal group who were big in the late 50s, early 60s in America, and who were kind of based in that tradition. Of course, the Barbershop Quartet thing is kind of an American tradition, isn't it?
So it's more the harmonies and stuff like that sort of, I just find it a bit twee. Is that
So when the Beatles sing the harmonies on Eleanor Rigby, is that twee?
No.
When they do the harmonies on Because on the Abbey Road album,
no.
Is that twee?
No, because it's the production of it as well. The production on the Beach Boys stuff just seems a little bit, I don't know. The best way to describe it is like Josh sticks. Yeah, they're going to smell nice, but I don't really like them being on.
Yeah, well, there's various phases with the Beach Boys' career. Of course, the early stuff is the kind of the surf rock band, and they're playing. And
that's probably the period that I think of.
They're doing
and that puts me off.
And of course, to a large extent, it was in a way formulaic teen music. Well, it was very formulaic teen music in a way, and they were started off doing slightly Chuck Berry rip-offs to a certain extent. Then Brian comes into his own as a songwriter, and you got a ballad like "Surfer Girl," which really shows the beauty of what he could do. Yeah. And then you've got the you can view them as, I suppose there are probably some people who only liked that stuff. Maybe the older people, maybe they only liked them when they did the surfy stuff, and they didn't like the more experimental stuff that Brian Wilson did. But I think most music geeks like to buy into the Brian Wilson genius angle. So that's more about the Brian Wilson productions where the band were touring and Brian was making the records with
yeah.
the Wrecking Crew, and he was doing his own sort of expansion upon what Phil Spector had started, which obviously
the wall of sound
reached its peak in a way with Pet Sounds, or possibly did it reach its peak with Smile? Depends on what your opinion is on that. But then, of course, there's the stuff after that, the late '60s stuff, which is a little bit more, or how would you say it? It's a little bit more. It's a bit different. It's different to the Pet Sounds orchestrated stuff. It's a little bit more organic and a little bit more. I don't know. It's different. That late '60s stuff. They weren't in tune with the psychedelic-y sounds of the late '60s. They were doing something a little bit different to that. And it wasn't hugely popular at the time. Of course, you have to remember that the Beach Boys were commercially successful in America when they were doing the surf rock stuff. Then the Beatles happened, and their commercial success declined in America. And when they did Pet Sounds, it was more or less a flop in the US. It was acclaimed over here, and it did quite well over here in the UK, but it wasn't a big commercially successful album in America in 1966. It was nowhere near one of the biggest albums of '66 at the time, although it's retrospectively viewed as a major album of that year. But at the time, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that everybody says, "Oh, Pet Sounds, you got to," but
and the band, and the band were touring, and the band was still probably doing pretty well touring in America, but they were still performing a lot of the old songs, and the cool people were into the Doors and Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, the Doors. I could get that.
And
I would much rather probably, with my knowledge at the moment, listen to those three over the Beach Boys.
Yeah, well, the Beach Boys were at the time were seen by a lot of people as being uncool in the sort of the mid and late '60s.
Yeah,
and they were
Paul McCartney of the '80s.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's also the Beach Boys stuff from the early '70s, which more people are talking about now and trying to kind of say that, well, this is great as well. And talking about albums like Surf's Up and Holland, the one they did in the Netherlands. And these are the albums where, well, Brian Wilson wasn't playing quite as much of a role then, but those albums are being talked about. In the last few years, I've heard that talked about and raved about more than ever before. And people have tended to go a little bit cool on Pet Sounds now, maybe because it's just been so acclaimed for so long
that people forget to check out other stuff.
Well, you see, I've heard, there's some people who will tell you Pet Sounds is amazing. There are other people who will say they've listened to Pet Sounds and they don't really get it. They think it's overrated. Although I can't help thinking that maybe some of the people who say it's overrated, if Pet Sounds was a forgotten, obscure album and they discovered it, they'd be saying they've discovered a great cult album that everybody should listen to. Yeah. So, it's difficult to know.
I'll tell you what, on my way to the gym,
a big difference. Yeah,
I will put Pet Sounds on.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's one you should listen to in the car, because I don't think it really works. I think you have to hear the arrangements properly. And I think there's a lot of stuff that will disappear in the road noise in the car.
I drive a Bentley, Phil. Everything's quiet.
Okay, yeah. I just think it's I'm not sure it's a car album, I think it's a stick it on your hi-fi system album, or maybe on headphones.
Okay.
If you got the stereo mix on
Beach Boys,
stereo mix on headphones, mono on the speakers to do what Brian's vision in mono. I don't know, but yeah, maybe go with Pet Sounds. Have you ever listened to the Smile stuff?
No,
because that's interesting. Because in some ways, I find that as interesting, and many times I like to listen to that more. But the great thing about Smile is it's kind of like, it's been compared with Sgt. Pepper because he was trying to match Sgt. Pepper. Yeah. He was trying to match Revolver, and I think Sgt. Pepper came out, and that was the thing that sort of finished Brian
Broke
off
his brain.
mentally. Yeah, you can, but it's a very different kind of record, Sergeant Pepper. But it's much more American. But it's the thing about it is it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle because he never really finished it. So you can't. It's not like Sergeant Pepper where you can put it on and hear that's what the Beatles did. That's how they finished it.
Yeah.
You've got to decide yourself where the tracks go. There's a bit more of a clue now because Brian Wilson did sort of officially finish it, and you can listen to the tracks in that order. But it's just mad.
Any
it's
album's
cool.
ever truly finished?
Well, yeah. I think I once saw an interview with U2 where Adam Clayton said none of our albums has ever really been finished. They've just been released.
Yeah.
But,
I think Noel Gallagher would probably say that.
Yeah.
You know, I think he says it about all their albums. You know, he listens back the mix and, you know.
But yeah, we let's not go too much into Smile. But Smile's I find it kind of weird and wonderful, and I really enjoy that kind of psychedelic stuff. And
well, maybe I'll have to listen to it. But that was my 15 artists that, you know.
We need to get, what we need to do, folks, we need to get Ben into REM and the Beach Boys. The others I'm not so bothered about. I'm not so bothered about the others, but we need to get him into those two.
We can do that.
So we need to come up with, give me some suggestions. What should I
formulate a plan?
What should I get him to listen to? Should I get him to read something about them? What is there? Are there any books? Are there any good articles online? Are there any good playlists or albums you should suggest that he starts with? How do we get him into the cult of REM and the Beach Boys?
Yeah, we can start with that. And maybe Prince as well.
Prince, yeah, that's another one. I
saw him in concert.
These are some of America's greatest ever, and you got to dig them.
You got to dig them, man. You got to dig them.
That has been another episode of Full Record Jacket. Thank you for watching. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for sharing, liking all of these comments you give us. We do read them. We don't just click like. We do read them. Sometimes we reply, of course. You may have noticed that. But thanks again. We'll do another one of these rambling conversations. We may have a purpose behind it as well. Join us next time. Thank you.